at a cultural foundation. You fired her for playing music.
She was touching the Steinway with...
I gave her permission. I have been giving her permission every night. For 8 months.
The auditorium was never this quiet. Not during galas. Not during donor speeches. Not during the moments when Minjun stood at the podium and watched Seoul's most powerful people pretend to care about the arts. But right now, with 60 guests frozen behind him, Minjun Kong had never heard silence like this in his life. He turned slowly. Madam Sun Hee Kong stood at the entrance in her cream silk hanbok, silver hair set, 81 years old, and pointing directly at him.
Bring her back.
The room didn't breathe.
Halmoni.
Right now.
Her voice didn't shake.
Bring that girl back into this building.
Minjun turned to the doorway. The janitor, the woman he had just publicly dismissed, had paused mid-step. She hadn't run. She hadn't cried. She was standing with her cart handle in one hand and a worn canvas bag over her shoulder, looking at his grandmother with an expression that had no performance in it at all. He looked back at the room. 60 faces. Investors. Board members. The cultural minister's deputy. Every single one of them waiting to see what kind of man he actually was.
Halmoni,
He said carefully.
this isn't the time to...
You fired a girl for playing piano?
His grandmother said, cutting him halfway. The room went silent.
At a cultural foundation.
She took one step forward.
You fired her for playing music.
She was touching the Steinway with...
I gave her permission.
Sun Hee's eyes didn't move from his face.
I have been giving her permission every night. For 8 months.
The word landed like a stone. 8 months. He turned back to the doorway. The woman, her badge read Sophia, had not moved. She was watching his grandmother with a warmth so unguarded it looked almost like the way his grandmother used to look at his aunt before they lost her. Something shifted beneath him. Not the floor. Something worse.
8 months. You've been coming down here.
Every night. While you were in your office reviewing contracts. While your mother's piano sat in the dark.
The room was a held breath.
Minyu looked at Sophia.
Who are you?
He said, not an accusation. Something closer to a man who had just realized the question mattered. Sophia looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at his grandmother. And Sun Hee Kong lifted her chin and said, to her grandson, to the room, to the 60 witnesses standing in that white marble hall.
She is the reason I came back to the table at dinner. She is the reason I attended your board ceremony in March. She and I called your mother last Sunday just to hear her voice.
She held his gaze without mercy. She is the reason I am still here,
And you
Minjun.
just fired her.
The silence that followed was the loudest thing Minjun Kong had ever heard. He turned back to the door. Sophia was still there, still standing. One hand on the frame, the other holding a canvas bag that carried what was left of a life she had rebuilt from nothing. She was not asking him for anything. She was simply waiting, with the patience of someone who had learned, long before tonight, that the world did not always correct itself. But sometimes it did.
If you want to know what happens,
Sophia said quietly, not to the room, not to him, but to the space between what is and what could still be.
when the woman everyone overlooked turns out to be the one holding everything together.
She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. If you want to know what happens when a billionaire fires the wrong woman and his grandmother makes sure the entire room knows it, keep watching. At Felicity Romance Stories, we are just getting started. Chapter 1. Sophia Carter had a system. She arrived at the Kong Cultural Arts Center at 10:47 p.m. every night, 13 minutes before her official shift began, because the Han River walk from the bus stop was exactly 22 minutes long, and she had learned in her first month that being early was the only form of armor available to someone in her position. She signed in at the service entrance on the building's east side. She nodded to the security guard, a heavy-set man named Dae Young, who always looked mildly surprised to see her, even though they had exchanged this same nod for 11 months. She collected her cart from the storage room on sublevel 2, checked her supplies, mop, 2 bucket sets, cleaning solution, microfiber cloths, extra garbage liners, and then she started at the top of the building and worked her way down. It was a beautiful building. She had decided that in her first week and had not changed her mind since. The Calm Cultural Arts Center rose 14 stories above the Hanam district of Seoul, clad in white stone and glass that caught the city's glow and held it like something precious. The lobby alone had been featured in 3 architecture magazines. The chandeliers in the main auditorium were imported from a Czech crystal house that had been crafting them since the 18th century. The grand staircase was a single unbroken pour of Italian marble, and the handrails were brushed brass that Sophia polished twice a week with a cloth and a product that cost more per bottle than her daily lunch. The foundation hosted classical concerts, contemporary exhibitions, international cultural exchanges, and the occasional gala that required her to show up at 6 a.m. to pre-clean before the event staff arrived. In the 11 months she had worked there, she had cleaned up after 3 Nobel Prize winners, 1 former prime minister, and a visiting conductor who had left an entire arrangement of peony stems scattered across the 3rd-floor restroom for reasons Sophia had never fully understood. To every person in the building, she was part of the infrastructure. She understood that. She did not resent it. It was simply the shape of the world she was currently living in, and she had found that resentment was a weight she couldn't afford to carry on top of everything else. She had other weights. Her mother, her father, and her younger brother had died within 14 months of each other when Sophia was 19. Her mother first, an aggressive cancer that moved faster than anyone was prepared for. Then her father 6 months later, who the doctors called a cardiac event, and who Sophia privately called a broken heart. Then Marcus, her 17-year-old brother, in a car accident on a Tuesday afternoon in November that still visited her in dreams she didn't talk about. In the space of 14 months, she had gone from being a scholarship student at a prestigious Atlanta conservatory, young, gifted, her whole future arranged neatly before her, to being a 20-year-old woman entirely alone, responsible for an estate that had no assets and several debts, and completely incapable of sitting at a piano without her chest caving in. She had dropped out. She had worked. She had kept working. Waitress. Hotel front desk. Administrative assistant. And then a recruiter for a Korean cleaning services company had been at the right job fair at the right time, offering competitive wages and a relocation package for multilingual applicants, and Sophia had remembered that she'd taken 4 years of Korean as an elective in high school simply because she had loved the sound of it. And 3 months later she was in Seoul with a 1-year contract and a furnished studio apartment in Mapogu. That had been 2 years ago. She had renewed the contract once. She had not renewed it for the reasons people usually stayed: opportunity, ambition, love. She had renewed it because Seoul was the first city where no street corner reminded her of anyone she had lost. And that was worth more than she had words for. She worked from the 14th floor down. Administrative offices, conference rooms, the gallery on 7, the donor lounge on 5, the main corridor bathrooms on 3. The auditorium was always last. It was always last because she allowed herself to save it. The auditorium on sublevel 1 was the jewel of the building. A 600-seat performance hall with acoustics so precise that the foundation had hired a sound engineer from Vienna to consult on them. The ceiling curved in a way that gathered sound and held it. The seats were upholstered in deep navy. The stage was elevated exactly 30 centimeters. She knew because she had measured it once out of simple curiosity, and centered on that stage, under a single spotlight that was never fully extinguished, was the piano. A Steinway Model D. Concert grand. Ebony polish so deep and dark it looked like still water at night. Gold lettering on the fallboard that caught the light whenever anyone moved near it. Sophia cleaned around it carefully. She never touched the keys during the first 3 months. Then one night in her 4th month, after a particularly bad dream about Marcus, she sat down on the bench. Just sat. She didn't play. She just let her hands rest on the closed fallboard and breathed until the tightness in her throat loosened. The next night, she lifted the lid. She placed 3 fingers on middle C, D, and E, and held them down until the sound faded. The acoustics caught it and gave it back to her softly, like a question. She came back the following night and played 4 measures of a Chopin nocturne she had memorized at 14. And then she had to stop because her eyes were full and she was on the clock. But she came back. She always came back. By her 6th month, she had a routine within her routine. Finish the cleaning. Turn off the overhead lights. Sit at the Steinway for exactly 30 minutes in the dim glow of the stage's single standing light. Play whatever her hands remembered. Then close the fallboard carefully, replace the bench, and leave the auditorium exactly as she found it. She was careful. She was quiet. She was invisible. She did not know, in those first months, that the sound traveled. The auditorium had been designed to share its acoustics generously with the building. A private balcony on the 2nd floor, accessible only from a staircase behind the founder's suite, looked down over the stage from behind a lattice screen. The balcony had been installed at the request of the foundation's founder, Park Jin-soo, so that his mother could attend performances without managing the crowds. Sophia did not know about the balcony. She did not know that on the 3rd night she played, the night she worked through the Chopin from beginning to end for the first time in 5 years, and cried quietly over the keys when she reached the final page, a small, silver-haired woman in a pale robe had settled into the chair behind the lattice screen above her and sat very still for 40 minutes, listening. She did not know that the woman had returned the following night, and the night after that, and every night since. She simply played, and somewhere above her, in the dark, a heart that had been closed for 4 years began, very slowly, to open. Chapter 2. Madame's son, He-Kong, was not supposed to be awake. Her doctor had been specific about this. Sleep hygiene, he called it, in that careful tone he used when he was trying not to sound like he was scolding her. No screens after 9. No stimulating conversation after dinner. No late-night walking. She was 80 years old when he said it, 81 now, and she had listened to him with the polite expression she reserved for people whose concern she appreciated without intending to act on. She had always been a night person. Her late husband used to say it was because she had been born during a blackout, a power failure across half of Busan on the night of her birth, and had simply never trusted daylight to hold all the important things. He said it as a joke, but there was something in it. The night had always felt more honest to her, more willing to tell the truth. She had spent the 4 years since her daughter Yunhee's death sitting with the night's honesty, and she had found it mostly unbearable. Yunhee had been 54. A stroke. Sudden and complete, the way the worst things always were. She had been in the middle of a phone call with Sunhee, talking about nothing, a dinner reservation, a dress she'd seen in a boutique window, and then the line had gone quiet, and Sunhee had known before anyone called her. The way mothers always knew. Minjun was Yunhee's son, Sunhee's only grandchild. He had stepped fully into the family foundation's leadership after his mother's death with a discipline that looked, from a distance, like strength, and that Sunhee recognized up close as grief wearing business attire. She did not say this to him. She did not say much to him anymore. They loved each other in the careful, formal way of people who had lost the translator between them. Yunhee had been that translator. Yunhee had also been the pianist. She had played from the time she was 4 years old, the same grand piano that now sat in the auditorium, moved there after Sunhee donated it to the foundation the year after her daughter died, because she could not keep it in the private residence and could not bear to sell it. She had told the foundation director it was a gift. She had told no one that she simply needed the music to still exist somewhere, in some room, even if she never heard it again. She heard it again in November 8 months ago. She had been unable to sleep. Nothing new, and had gone to the balcony for air. Not the auditorium balcony. The outer terrace of the founder's suite on the 2nd floor. It was cold. She had a blanket. She was sitting in the dark thinking about very little, which was the closest she came to peace anymore, when she heard it.
Faint.
Rising from somewhere in the building below.
Piano.
She had thought she was dreaming. She had thought, with a suddenness that stole the breath from her chest, that she was hearing Yunhee. She had gone inside and stood very still in the middle of the room for a long time. The music continued. She followed it. She knew about the balcony above the auditorium. She had used it many times before Yunhee died, during performances, when she wanted to watch without being watched. She had not been inside it since. But her feet remembered the staircase, and when she pushed the door open and stepped into the dark space behind the lattice screen, the music rose up to meet her fully. Below, in the pool of stage light, a young woman sat at the Steinway. Black. Young, mid-20s perhaps. A janitor's badge on a lanyard around her neck, her cart parked against the far wall. She was playing with her eyes half closed and her shoulders curved around the keys in the way of someone who had been doing this since before she understood what it meant. Chopin. The E minor nocturne. Yunhee's favorite. Sunhee had lowered herself into the chair and sat without moving for 40 minutes. When the girl finally closed the fallboard and turned off the stage lamp and pushed her cart out of the auditorium, Sunhee remained in the chair for another 20 minutes. Then she went back to the suite and, for the first time since Yunhee died, she slept until morning. She went back the following night, and the night after. She began to anticipate it, to organize her evenings around the knowledge that at some point after midnight, music would rise from below, and she would go and listen. She started taking a cup of tea to the balcony. She started wearing proper clothes instead of her robe, which felt important without her being entirely able to say why. By the second month, she had begun leaving things. One night, she had come down to the auditorium after she heard the music stop, knowing the girl would still be putting away her supplies, and she had left a thermos of barley tea on the piano bench with a note that said only, "Your hands must get cold." She had not signed it. She had gone back to the balcony staircase and listened to the silence below, wondering if she had done something strange. She heard the cart stop. A long pause. Then the sound of the thermos being opened. The next night, the girl had played for an extra 10 minutes. He decided this was a conversation. Over the months that followed, it became one. The notes grew. Short things, nothing personal, but alive in a way that Sunhee hadn't felt in years. "You played that piece differently tonight. Slower. I liked it better." The girl's responses, left on a scrap of cleaning receipt paper or a sticky note from the supply room. "I wasn't sure about the tempo. Thank you for telling me." And then one night, arriving at the auditorium with her barley tea, Sunhee had found the girl still sitting at the piano rather than cleaning, and they had simply looked at each other across the darkened room, and Sunhee had said, "You play as though no one is listening." The girl had looked at her for a moment, then said quietly, "I didn't know anyone was." "I have been," Sunhee said, "for months." The girl's face moved through something complicated. She stood from the bench.
I'm sorry.
"I should have asked. Don't apologize." Sunhee set her thermos on the edge of the stage and sat down in the front row. "Sit back down. Tell me your name." The girl sat.
Sophia, she said.
"Korean? American." A pause. "I learned Korean in school." "Your music sounds like something much older than school." Sunhee looked at the piano. "How long have you been playing?" A longer pause this time. "Since I was 6, Sophia said. "I used to compete. I had a scholarship."
She stopped.
Then simply, things changed. Sunhee understood, not pressing. Some doors could only be opened from the inside. "I had a daughter," she said instead. "She played that piano for 40 years. She died 4 years ago." The auditorium was quiet. "I'm sorry," Sophia said. She said it the way people said it when they actually meant it, which in Sunhee's experience was rarer than it should have been. "She would have liked your playing," Sunhee said. "She would have said your left hand is better than your right." The girl made a sound that was almost a laugh. It was the first sound in 4 years that had landed in Sunhee's chest without hurting. Chapter 3. Minjun Kong had not slept past 5:30 a.m. since he was 23 years old. He was 36 now, which meant he had spent 13 years treating rest like a quarterly report, something to be minimized, optimized, and completed efficiently before moving on to what actually mattered. The Foundation sole directors had learned not to schedule calls before 7. His personal assistant had learned not to send non-urgent messages before 6. The cleaning staff had learned early and thoroughly that the building operated differently when Minjun was in it, and differently still when he was in it and under pressure, and the Yun Cultural Endowment Gala was in 36 hours, and the Dutch Foundation director had added 2 new items to the agenda, and the string quartet had cancelled due to illness, and Minjun was, in the precise clinical language he preferred, under pressure. He had arrived at the foundation at 5:55 a.m. that morning and had not stopped moving since. He was not unkind. He wanted to be clear about that with himself, because he was a man who required clarity about himself. He was demanding, but he was fair. He expected precision because he had learned from watching his grandmother grieve that the world did not give you second chances gracefully, and so it was better to build things that didn't require them. He did not yell. He did not demean. He simply expected the standard he himself maintained, which was absolute, and he accepted nothing less. The foundation staff respected him. Whether they liked him was a matter he had long ago stopped tracking. His assistant, Ji-young, had left 3 separate notes on his desk referencing his grandmother's recent habit of using the founder's suite overnight when she was in Seoul. Min-jun had read each note and filed it in a category of things he was grateful for without knowing how to address. His grandmother had been. The family word was withdrawn since Yun-hee died. His mother, his grandmother's daughter-in-law, still alive, still managing the family residence in Songbuk-dong, had told him twice in the past 2 months that Sun-hee seemed different lately. Lighter, more present at dinner, more likely to initiate conversation. Min-jun had noted this as a positive development and told himself he would visit more and had not visited more because there was the endowment event and the renovation proposal and the Vienna partnership and the 11 other things. He was aware this was a failure. He was less clear on how to correct it. What he understood, the language he moved through most fluently, was the building, the foundation. The work his grandmother had poured her life into before grief contracted her world to the size of a private suite. He protected it the way he would have protected her if he had known how. By making sure the Steinway was tuned monthly. By approving every acquisition personally. By ensuring that the Kong name on the building's facade meant something permanent and serious and worth the sacrifice it had been built from. Which was why, at 6:14 p.m. on the evening of the Yun Endowment Gala, with 60 guests and cocktail hour, the Dutch director in conversation near the bar and the cultural minister's deputy moving toward the auditorium to take her seat, he pushed open the auditorium's main doors to complete his pre-event security check and saw a woman sitting at the Steinway. Not a performer. There was no performer scheduled. The string quartet had canceled. The program had been restructured to a recorded soundtrack. He looked at her badge. Service staff. Sophia C. He looked at her hands on the keys. He looked at the 60 guests who had followed the deputy minister's movement and were now filing slowly into the auditorium and taking their seats around him, many of them pausing to look at the stage, some of them lowering themselves with the attentive posture of people who thought this was part of the program. He felt something tighten in his chest that he would later understand was the last moment before a mistake becomes permanent. He walked to the edge of the stage. Stop. She stopped. Her hands lifted from the keys. She turned toward him with an expression he could not read. Get up. She stood. Your badge, he said. He heard his own voice, flat, controlled, exactly the register he used when he needed a room to understand that something had ended. Your service staff. Yes, she said. This instrument is valued at $400,000. This event is, he caught himself. The room was watching. This is a private foundation event. This piano is not available for unsanctioned use. She said nothing. She looked at him the way someone looked when they were choosing carefully. Collect your things, he said. Your supervisor will be contacted. Your employment with the foundation is terminated, effective tonight. A sound moved through the seated guests. Sophia didn't flinch. She reached for the lanyard at her throat, unclipped the badge, and set it on the piano bench with a steadiness that made the tightness in his chest worse rather than better. She picked up her canvas bag. She held her head in the way of someone who had navigated public humiliation before and had developed a specific architecture for surviving it. She was almost at the auditorium door when his grandmother's voice came from the entrance behind her. Minyoon. He turned. Sun-hee Kong stood in the doorway in her cream silk hanbok, her white hair set and formal, her eyes on him with an expression he had not seen since she used to discipline him when he was 8 years old and had broken something expensive. Bring her back, she said. The room went completely still. Helmoni. Right now. His grandmother's voice did not waver. Bring that girl back into this building. At the door, Sophia had stopped walking. She hadn't turned around. She was simply standing still, canvas bag in hand, waiting for whatever came next. Min-jun looked at his grandmother. He looked at the 60 guests. He looked at the woman at the door. And he understood, with the part of him that had learned to recognize irreversible moments, that something was already broken that he had not known was fragile. Chapter 4. The silence lasted long enough to become its own presence. Then Sun Hee Kong walked forward. She did not walk quickly. She was 81 years old, and she moved with the deliberate grace of a woman who had decided long ago that urgency was for people who were uncertain of their destination. She moved past her grandson, without looking at him again. She moved past the front row of seated guests. She stopped at the edge of the stage and looked up at the piano bench where Sophia's badge still lay. Then she turned to face the room. "My daughter Kong Yun-hee played that instrument for 40 years, she said. Her Korean was precise, her voice carrying in the auditorium's perfect acoustics without effort. Ji Young, Min-jun's assistant, was already moving quietly to provide translation for the international guests. When Yun-hee died, I gave it to this foundation because I wanted the music to continue. I did not believe I would ever hear it the way she played it again." The room was motionless. 8 months ago, Sun Hee continued, I heard music from this stage in the middle of the night. I came to listen, and I have come back every night since. She turned. Sophia had come back into the doorway. She hadn't fully entered the room. She was standing at the threshold, one hand on the door frame, watching Sun Hee with an expression that Min-jun, watching from the side of the stage, recognized now as the expression of someone trying not to cry in a room full of strangers. "Come in, Sophia," Sun Hee said softly. The Korean honorific, familiar, warm, used for someone younger and cared for, landed in the room like a stone in still water. Min-jun felt the ripple of it move through the guests around him. Sophia walked forward slowly. She stopped a few feet from Sun Hee. "Tell them," Sun Hee said, "what you told me." Sophia shook her head slightly. "That's not." "Tell them," Sun Hee said again. Gentle but immovable. A long breath. Sophia looked at the floor for a moment, then raised her eyes to the middle distance and began to speak. She spoke briefly. She was not performing. She did not use the language people used when they wanted something from an audience. She said that she had been a music student before her family died, that she had not played in public in 6 years, that she played here because the acoustics made her feel, in the dark, like she wasn't alone with it, that she and Madame Kong had talked sometimes after, and that those conversations had mattered to her more than she had words for, that she had never intended to disrupt anything, and that she was genuinely sorry. She stopped. Sun Hee looked at Min-jun. "She did not touch her piano," she said. Her voice was quiet now, but clear. "She touched my heart. And you dismissed her without asking a single question." Min-jun's jaw was tight. He was looking at Sophia and calculating backward. 8 months, every night, his grandmother leaving her suite and walking to that balcony, his mother saying she's coming back to us, I don't know why, but she is, and he understood now the shape of what he had destroyed in 60 seconds of unchecked assumption. He had fired the person keeping his grandmother alive. The Dutch Foundation director leaned toward his colleague and murmured something. The cultural minister's deputy had her hand pressed lightly to her mouth. Around the room, the understanding was settling not as drama, but as something heavier, as the recognition of a real thing having happened in front of them. Min-jun stepped down from the stage level. He stood in front of Sophia. She looked at him without flinching, which was the only thing she had done since he first saw her that had been entirely for herself. "Your position is reinstated," he said. Her expression didn't change. He said, and this part cost him something he could feel precisely, a formal apology, "for the manner in which I addressed you." Sophia looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Sun Hee. Sun Hee gave her the smallest nod. "Thank you," Sophia said. Not warmly, not coldly, simply, with the precision of someone accepting what was being offered while deciding privately what it was worth. She picked her badge up from the piano bench. Min-jun watched her and felt something he had not felt since his mother died, the specific discomfort of having been genuinely wrong in a way that mattered. Not wrong about a number, not wrong about a strategy, wrong about a person, wrong in the way that left a mark. Sunhee settled into the front row beside him, smoothing her hanbok over her knees. She plays the second movement of the Rachmaninoff second better than anyone I've heard since your mother, she said quietly, as if this were simply a fact being filed for his records. Minjun said nothing. He watched Sophia move to the side of the stage, badge reclipped, bag over shoulder, standing slightly apart from the room with the posture of someone waiting to understand what version of the world she was currently in. He had the sudden, unwelcome thought that she was very beautiful. He set it aside and went back to work. Chapter 5. He sent flowers the next morning. Not to be romantic. He was clear with himself about that. He sent them because his assistant had informed him, delicately, that a verbal apology delivered under public pressure in a room full of witnesses was not what a person of good conscience would consider adequate, and Minjun had recognized this as correct. The flowers were white, arranged simply, with a card that read, "My apology last night was not sufficient. If you would allow it, I would like to speak with you properly."
MK.
Ji-young delivered them to the staff locker room before the morning shift. At 7:15 a.m., Ji-young returned to Minjun's office and reported that the flowers had been accepted and that Sophia had said she appreciated them and that she was available to meet at his convenience.
Minyoon appreciates it, Lise.
She could have declined. That she hadn't told him something, though he wasn't entirely certain what. They met in his office at noon. He had ordered food, simple things, kimbap, soup, the kind of meal that didn't imply an agenda. Sophia arrived in her staff uniform, which he noticed she had not changed despite the fact that she was technically off the clock. She sat down across from him with her hands in her lap and looked at him with steady, evaluating patience. "I should have asked," he said. "Yes. I made an assumption based on what I looked like," she said. "And what I was wearing." He didn't flinch from it. "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "I appreciate you saying that directly." "I don't," he stopped. He was not comfortable with this kind of conversation, and he was self-aware enough to know it, and he was trying to conduct it anyway. "I don't have a habit of treating people the way I treated you last night. I want you to know that." "People rarely think they do," she said. Not unkindly. Factually. He considered this. "You're right," he said. Something in her expression shifted slightly, like she had expected him to defend himself and was recalibrating. "Tell me about the scholarship," he said. She blinked. "My grandmother told me some of it," he said. "She didn't tell me all of it. I'm asking because I want to understand, not because I'm building a case for anything." A pause. Then she told him, the way she had told the room the night before, but more, the specifics. The conservatory in Atlanta. The Chopin competition she had placed third in at 16. The full ride to study performance at a university in Vienna that she had been awarded at 17 and had deferred after her parents died, thinking she would return to it, and had deferred again, and had finally let go of because you couldn't defer forever and you couldn't grieve forever, and at some point surviving took all the bandwidth that dreaming used to occupy. She told it without asking for anything from him. That was the part that stayed with him afterward. She wasn't performing her tragedy. She was simply answering a question. "Why Seoul?" he asked. "No corners," she said. He didn't understand immediately. Then he did. He was quiet. "Why the Steinway?" he asked. "There are other pianos in the city." She looked at him for a long moment. "Because the acoustics in that room make it feel like the music doesn't just go out, it comes back," she said. "Like it stays in the room for a little while. With you." She paused. "I know that sounds." "It doesn't," he said. She looked at him. He looked at the window. "My mother played that piano," he said. It was the first time he had said that sentence out loud to a non-family member since Yeonhee died. The acoustics were part of why she loved this room. She used to say that in most concert halls the music leaves you. In this one, it stays. Sophia said nothing for a moment. Then she said softly, she was right. They ate the kimbap. The conversation moved to smaller things. How long she had been in Seoul, which neighborhood she knew, whether she found the city cold. He discovered she was methodical about learning places, which he respected. He discovered she was quietly, carefully funny, which he had not expected. He discovered that she was looking at him across the table with the expression of someone who had decided to be open to something they were not yet certain was safe. He recognized the expression. He had worn it himself for 4 years. When she stood to leave, she paused at the door. "Your grandmother leaves me barley tea," she said. On the piano bench. "I know," he said, though he hadn't known until last night. "She told me once that your mother used to make it for her when she couldn't sleep." Sophia looked at the door frame. "I just thought you should know that it matters to her. The music. What it means." She turned back to him briefly. "What you are to her. She talks about you." He didn't know what to do with that, so he said nothing. She nodded once and left. He sat in his office for an additional 12 minutes after she was gone before he picked up his phone and called his grandmother. Chapter 6. 2 weeks passed. Sophia resumed her shifts. She cleaned the 14th floor to sublevel 1, and at the end of the night she played, and above her in the dark of the balcony staircase sun he listened, and the rhythm of the thing that had been built between them continued, a little changed but not broken. What was different was Minjun. He started arriving at the building slightly later. Not late. Minjun Kong was constitutionally incapable of late, but he had shifted his last evening commitment earlier, which meant he was still in the building when Sophia arrived for her shift. He did not adjust his schedule to intersect with hers deliberately. He told himself this clearly and regularly. He simply worked later than he used to, and the building was large, and it happened sometimes that he was descending in the elevator as she was ascending in the service lift, and they would see each other in the lobby and exchange a few words. These conversations were brief. He was aware that he listened to them again afterward. She asked him once, in the 3rd-floor corridor, why the Renoir print near the donor lounge was hung 3 centimeters lower than the matching frame beside it. He knew immediately because the building manager had made a minor error during rehang and Minjun had noted it on a punch list and not followed up. He told her this. She said she had been noticing it for months and wondering if it was intentional. He said it was not. "Should I tell someone?" she asked. "I'll have it corrected," he said. She looked at the print. "It's the one your grandmother chose, isn't it? The label says donated by the Kong family, in memory of Kong Yunhee." He said yes. She said, "Then it should be right." He had it corrected the next morning. He began to understand that she noticed things. Not in the way of someone building inventory, but in the way of someone for whom a building was not backdrop but environment, a place she moved through with full attention, cataloging small beauties and small wrongnesses with equal care. She mentioned once that the 3rd-floor bathroom had an exhaust fan making a sound that was going to become a problem within 60 days. He had facilities check it. They found a worn bearing that would have failed in 6 weeks. He started to see the building differently, through her eyes, which were careful and honest and unglamored by its wealth. He had a meeting with the Vienna Partnership on a Thursday afternoon that ran long, and at 11:15 p.m., he was still in his office reviewing the contract language when he heard, faintly, the piano. He sat with it for a moment. Then he picked up his jacket and walked to the auditorium. He did not go in. He stood outside the closed door and listened through the wall. Rachmaninoff. The second movement his grandmother had named. Sophia played it slowly, fully, without rushing the grief in it. Minjun stood in the hallway with his jacket over his arm and felt the music move through the door like something physical. He thought about his mother. He thought about the last conversation he'd had with her, on the phone about a logistics contract, because there had always been something about a logistics contract or a board meeting or a renovation proposal, and she had died 3 weeks later during what should have been a routine procedure, and he had never finished the conversation. The music continued. When it ended, he walked back to his office and sat down. He did not review the Vienna contract. He sat for a long time in the dark of his office, thinking about the fact that he had spent 4 years since his mother died building things with more urgency and less soul than he had built them before, and that somewhere in that building a woman was playing his mother's piano in an empty auditorium at midnight and making his grandmother leave her suite and come downstairs because life, even in grief, was still worth moving toward. He thought, I don't know how to do what she does. He thought, I want to. The following evening he ran into Sophia at the service entrance. She was earlier than usual. So was he. Late night, she asked. Early morning, he said. Same difference at this point. She considered this. I make really good instant ramen, she said. If the vending machine on 3 is disappointing you. He looked at her. She looked at him. I'm being serious, she said. I have a hot plate in the break room. I bring the good kind. The ones with the egg. The staff break room, he said. That's where the hot plate is. He should have said no. He had a contract to review and an 8 a.m. call to Tokyo and a very clear understanding of the professional boundaries appropriate between the foundation's director and its cleaning staff. What kind of egg, he said.
Soft-boiled, she said.
Marinated in soy and mirin. I do them on Sunday nights and bring enough for the week. That's not instant ramen, he said.
No, she said.
But the noodles are. He ate ramen with her in the staff break room at 11:30 p.m., sitting across from her at a Formica table under fluorescent lights while she told him about the difference between the 3 brands she had tried and why the broth mattered more than the noodles, and how her mother used to make her scrambled eggs for dinner when there wasn't anything else, and how she had spent years trying to get back to a version of eggs that felt like that and had landed on the soy-marinated soft-boiled as the closest.
She'd found.
He sat across from her and listened and ate and did not check his phone once. You're different than I thought you were, she said near the end. In what way? He asked.
She thought about it.
You listen more than you talk, she said. I didn't expect that. He said, I didn't expect the egg. She laughed. He had not made a woman laugh, genuinely, fully, freely, in longer than he wanted to count. He thought, I'm in trouble. Chapter 7. It was Sun-hee who named it first. She did not name it to Min-jun. She named it to Sophia on a Friday night, sitting together in the front row of the empty auditorium with 2 cups of barley tea and the low stage lamp making the room feel like the inside of something warm. He was here last week, Sunny said, outside the auditorium. I heard him in the corridor. Sophia was quiet. He didn't come in, Sunny said. But he stayed for the whole piece. More quiet. He's not a complicated man, Sunny said. He looks complicated. He is not. He is a man who doesn't know how to be still, so he built a life that never required it. She looked at her tea. My daughter was the one who could make him stop. When she died, he forgot how. I'm not, Sophia stopped. I'm not asking you to be anything, Sunny said. I'm telling you what I see. You can do with it what you like. Sophia thought about the ramen, the conversation about eggs, and her mother's kitchen. The way he had sat across from her with his jacket on the back of his chair and his phone in his pocket and listened like she was the most interesting problem he'd been given all week. She thought about the way he had said it doesn't when she worried that what she'd said about the music staying in the room sounded foolish. He fired me in front of 60 people, she said. Yes, son, he said. And then he brought you back. Apologized privately and publicly, sent flowers, ordered lunch, and stood in a hallway listening to you play for 40 minutes instead of going home.
She paused.
I'm not saying he handled it right the first time. I'm saying watch what a person does when they've been wrong. Sophia looked at the stage. I'm a janitor, she said. You are a musician, son, he said, who is currently working as a janitor. Those are not the same sentence. They sat in comfortable quiet. He asked me last week, son, he said, whether you had mentioned whether you'd consider performing again. Sophia turned to look at her. He didn't ask you directly? Sonny said.
No.
He wouldn't. Not yet. She smiled slightly. He's indirect when he's afraid of the answer. What did you tell him? I told him it wasn't my story to tell. Sophia looked at the piano. The truth was that she had been thinking about it. Not performing, not with an audience, not yet, but the question beneath the question, which was whether she was still the person who had earned that scholarship, who had heard the word prodigy applied to her hands and believed it, who had a future in music that grief had simply interrupted rather than erased. Playing here, in this room, in the dark, had been slowly teaching her that the answer was yes. She was still that person. She had just been waiting for a room with good enough acoustics to hear herself again. What would I even do? She said. I'm 2 years out of a conservatory dropout situation with no performance history for the last 6 years. I didn't ask what you would do, son, he said serenely. I asked what you were considering. You didn't ask anything. I implied. Sophia looked at her, and Sunhee looked back, and they both laughed. The specific laugh of two women who had been circling something carefully and had just admitted it to each other. Minjun chose this moment to walk into the auditorium.
He stopped.
He looked at his grandmother sitting in the front row with Sophia, both of them half laughing with their tea, in the low warmth of the stage lamp, and Minjun's face did something that Sunhee watched with careful, quiet pleasure. He looked like someone who had just found a room he hadn't known was missing. Halmoni, he said. I came to say goodnight. You knew where I was, Sunhee said pleasantly. I knew where you usually are at this hour, yes. He looked at Sophia. I didn't mean to interrupt. You're not, Sophia said. She reached for her tea. He stood for a moment, clearly uncertain whether to leave or stay. Sit down, Minjuna, his grandmother said. He sat. And for the first time in 4 years, all three of them were in the same room at the same hour, and no one was performing grief, and no one was performing propriety, and no one was managing anything. They just sat. After a while, Sophia got up and went to the piano. She played quietly, unhurried, something that drifted rather than declared itself. He closed her eyes. Minjun sat with his forearms on his knees and watched the stage and let himself, for the first time in a very long time, simply be somewhere without needing it to be somewhere useful. When Sophia finished, the three of them sat in the silence that good music leaves behind. Same time tomorrow. He said. Same time tomorrow, Sophia said. Minjun said nothing. But he didn't leave until Sophia did. Chapter 8. He asked her about the Vienna scholarship on a Tuesday. They were in the lobby, which had become one of their places, a strange, accidental geography of proximity that had developed over the past 3 weeks without either of them naming it or planning it. The lobby and the staff corridor on 3, and the break room with the hot plate and the formica table. Neutral spaces that belonged to neither of them specifically and therefore felt, somehow, available to both. Minjun had been heading toward the main entrance after a dinner meeting that had run long. Sophia had been coming in from the East Side service entrance, earlier than usual because the Han River walk had been cold enough tonight to move quickly. They had met in the middle of the lobby the way people met when the building was theirs alone after midnight, without ceremony, without the social scaffolding that the daytime required. She had been unwrapping the scarf from around her neck. He had been loosening his tie. And he had said it before he fully decided to. The Vienna scholarship, he said. The university still has a mature student performance track. I had someone look into it. Sophia's hands stilled on her scarf. She looked at him. He stood with his jacket over one arm and his expression arranged into something careful and precise, the way it always was when he was saying something that mattered to him and didn't want it to show too clearly. You had someone look into it, she said. I looked into it myself, he said. Ji Young pulled the formal program documents. The research was mine. She finished unwrapping the scarf slowly, folded it once, set it on top of her canvas bag. When? She asked. 3 days after we had lunch, he said. She was quiet. 3 days after lunch. Which meant he had gone back to his office after their first real conversation and sat down at his desk and, instead of the Vienna partnership contract or the renovation proposal or the 11 other things that lived permanently on his schedule, he had opened a browser and typed something about a music conservatory on her behalf. She didn't know what to do with that, so she looked at the lobby floor. Why? She asked. Because you should be playing, he said. The words came out directly, without the managed quality his professional voice carried. Properly. With instruction if you want it. With an audience eventually. Because what you do in that auditorium at midnight is, he stopped. She heard him recalibrate. Because it would be a waste, he said finally, for something like that to only exist in the dark. She looked up. He was watching her with that direct, unhurried attention that she had learned, slowly, reluctantly, against her better judgment, meant he was being completely honest. Not performing honesty. Not managing toward a conclusion. Just honest. It was, she had decided, the most disarming thing about him. More disarming than the flowers he'd sent. More disarming than the lunch he'd ordered. More disarming even than the correctly rehung Renoir print she had walked past every shift since and felt something small and warm about. The attention was the thing, the quality of it, the way it landed on her without agenda. She had not been looked at that way in a long time. She turned and walked toward the far end of the lobby, not away from him, but alongside the idea, needing a little space between herself and what she was about to say. "You don't owe me anything," she said. Her back was still half-turned. "I understand that the situation last month felt like a debt. I understand that publicly apologizing in front of 60 guests and reinstating my position and sending flowers and buying lunch I understand what that was. I accepted it. But this is different." "How is it different?" he asked. He hadn't moved. "Because this isn't correcting a mistake anymore." She turned around. "This is something else. And I need to know what." He looked at her across the marble expanse of the lobby. The chandeliers were dimmed to their overnight setting, low, amber, the kind of light that made the building feel inhabited rather than institutional. The Renoir print on the far wall caught a slant of it. The staircase swept up behind him in its single unbroken pour of Italian marble, and Min Jun Kong stood at the base of it in his loosened tie and his jacket over his arm looking, for the first time since she had met him, like a man who wasn't entirely certain what came next. "It's not transactional," he said. "That's what I asked you before," she said. "At lunch. You said the same thing." "Because it's still true." "Then what is it?" He was quiet for a moment. "I stood in the hallway outside the auditorium," he said. 11 days ago. I wasn't going to go in. I was passing through on the way back from the parking level, and I heard the music and I stopped."
He paused.
"I stood there for 40 minutes. She knew. Son, he had told her. But she didn't say so. "The piece you were playing," he said. "The Rachmaninoff. My mother used to play that movement when she was working through something difficult. She said the tempo forced her to slow down, that you couldn't rush it without breaking it." He looked at the floor briefly, then back at her. "I hadn't thought about that in 4 years. I hadn't let myself think about it. And I stood in that hallway, and I thought about it for 40 minutes, and when the music stopped I went back to my office, and I sat there in the dark, and he stopped." She waited. "I didn't review the Vienna contract," he said, "which I had been intending to review for 3 days. Just Saturday." A pause. "I haven't just sat since she died." The lobby held the silence between them. Sophia understood, in the way of someone who had lived inside grief long enough to recognize its specific architecture, what he was telling her. Not that he was grateful, not that he owed her. He was telling her that something had moved in him, that she had moved it, and that he was not the kind of man who knew how to say that simply, so he was saying it through the only language he trusted, through facts, through timeline, through the specific and honest accounting of what had happened to him, and when. She walked back toward him slowly. "You could have just told me that," she said. "At lunch. Instead of the scholarship materials." "I know," he said. "Why didn't you?" He looked at her with that direct gaze. "Because telling you that felt like asking for something," he said. "And I didn't want to ask you for something. I wanted to give you something instead." She stood a few feet from him and looked at him for a long moment. She thought about the 6 years since Marcus died. The careful, contracted life she had built inside the grief. Small apartment, small routine, small footprint, nothing that required too much of her because she hadn't had too much to give. The way she had come to Seoul looking for a city with no corners that reminded her of anyone, and had found it, and had been quietly, deliberately invisible inside it for 2 years. The way the auditorium had been the one place she allowed herself to be fully present, in the dark, alone, playing for no audience, asking nothing of the music except that it stay. She thought about what it had cost her to be in that room, to let herself be seen by Sunhee first, and then, unwillingly, and then willingly, by this man. "I need you to understand something," she said. Her voice was steady. "About how I've been living."
"Tell me," he said.
"I've been very careful," she said, "about whose hands I put my future in. Because every time I've extended that, every time I've trusted someone to hold something that mattered to me, the ground has moved. My mother, my father, my brother, the scholarship, the conservatory. Every time I gave someone or something the weight of my future, it was taken away."
She paused.
"So, I stopped giving it. I kept everything small. I kept everything mine. And I survived." He was listening with that full, unhurried attention. I don't want a patron, she said. I don't want someone to fix what happened to me. I don't want to be a project or a correction or a redemption story for someone who feels guilty about a bad night. She met his eyes. I want to be a person, in a room, with another person, who is actually there. The lobby was very quiet. I have been in the room, he said. The words were quiet and precise. More than once. I was there at lunch. I was there in the break room at midnight eating ramen I had no business eating. I was there in the hallway for 40 minutes listening to you play. I have been there, Sophia. She held his gaze. I know, she said. Something in the air between them shifted. Not dramatically. Quietly. The way pressure changes before rain. Not yet rain, but no longer the same air as before. I'm not taking charity from you, she said. I know. And I'm not a project. I know that too. And if I look into the university program, she said, it will be because I decided to. Not because you arranged it. Not because it comes with your name attached to it. On my own terms, through my own application, with my own materials. Obviously, he said, with a simplicity that meant he had never assumed otherwise. She exhaled slowly. Send me the program information, she said. Just the information. Not an endorsement. Not a call to the admissions office. Not a donation to the department. He almost smiled. Understood. 이민이지, 민윤. If I find out you... I won't, he said. She looked at him. You called me Minjun, he said. She blinked. She had. Not Mr. Kong. Not Director Kong. Just his name, the way Sun He used it, the way it sounded when it wasn't a title. Is that, she started. No, he said quickly. It's fine. He stopped. I prefer it. She looked at him for a moment. This controlled, precise, grief-armored man standing in the amber light of his own lobby at midnight, jacket over his arm, telling her he preferred the way she said his name. She thought, I am in so much trouble. The egg ramen, she said, because she needed to say something that wasn't what she was actually thinking, was better than anything Vienna has to offer. He made a sound that was the closest thing to a laugh she had yet extracted from him. I'll tell Jiyoung, he said. She'll be devastated. She should be, Sophia said. Those noodles are a serious cultural contribution. He looked at her with that smile that wasn't quite a smile, the one that lived at the corner of his mouth and disappeared before it fully arrived, like something he hadn't yet given himself permission to do completely. Walk with me, he said. She looked at him. Just the lobby, he said. I'm not. I just don't want to go up to the office yet. She considered this. She picked up her canvas bag and her scarf. They walked the perimeter of the lobby slowly, the way people walked when the walking was the point rather than the destination. Past the Renoir. Past the donor wall, with its bronze plaques. Past the cabinet that held the Foundation's award citations and the photograph of the groundbreaking in 1987, a much younger Sun He in the center of it, laughing at something off camera, her daughter Yun Hee beside her with her hand raised against the sun. Sophia stopped at the photograph. She looks like you, she said. Your mother. Around the eyes. Minjun stood beside her and looked at the photograph for a long moment. She was funnier than me, he said. Than I am. Most people are, Sophia said. He looked at her. She looked back, straight-faced, and waited. The corner of his mouth moved. That was a joke, he said. It was an observation, she said. The joke was implied. He made that almost laugh sound again, and this time it got further than the corner of his mouth, and Sophia felt it land in her chest like a warm thing, like a cord resolving after a long suspension, and she turned back to the photograph before her face could say anything she hadn't decided to say yet. She would have liked this, he said quietly, meaning the photograph, the conversation, the two of them standing here at midnight, meaning something he couldn't quite name. Your grandmother says she would have liked my playing, Sophia said. She would have liked you, he said. She liked people who said true things. Sophia was quiet. She sounds like someone I would have liked too, she said. They stood at the photograph for another moment. Then Sophia shifted her bag to her other shoulder and said, I should start my shift. Yes, he said, not moving. The 14th floor doesn't clean itself. No, he said, still not moving. She looked at him. He was looking at her with an expression she recognized now, the one that meant he was saying something with his face that he hadn't yet cleared through the part of him that managed everything. Open. Unguarded. Real. Good night, Minjun, she said. Good night, Sophia, he said. She walked to the service corridor. She did not look back. She was smiling before she reached the elevator, and she pressed the button for the 14th floor and stood in the small metal box as it rose and thought about the photograph and the laugh and his name in her mouth and the fact that somewhere below her he was still in the lobby. She was almost certain of it, standing in the amber light under the dimmed chandeliers in his loosened tie. She was right. He stood there for another 4 minutes before he went back upstairs. And in the morning, before his 8 a.m. Tokyo call, and before GM arrived, and before the Vienna contract, and before all 11 other things, Minjun Kong sent Sophia Carter the program information for the mature student performance track. Just the information, no endorsement, no calls, no donations, with a single line attached. On your terms. Always. Chapter 9. The audition was in May. Sophia had not told many people. Sun he knew, because Sophia had told her during one of their midnight auditorium nights, and Sunhee had set down her barley tea and taken Sophia's hands in both of hers and said, "Good."
Just that.
Just good. The way someone said it when they meant this is right, and I'm proud of you, and I've been waiting for this all at once. Minjun knew because he had left the application materials on her locker shelf with a note that said, "In case you wanted them."
No obligación.
And she had taken them. She had applied on her own, requested her own transcripts from Atlanta, written her own personal statement, 4 drafts all too formal, and then a 5th that began, "My mother died when I was 19 and music died with her for a while. This is about what I did to get it back," and sent it without showing it to anyone. She received an interview invitation in April. The audition itself was in a practice room at a Seoul affiliate campus. 3 faculty members. A Yamaha Grand that was not the Steinway but was good. 40 minutes to play whatever she chose. She played the Chopin Nocturne. She played a Ravel piece she had learned at 15 and never performed publicly. She played 4 minutes of something she had been composing herself, slowly, in the margins of the late-night sessions at the Foundation, a piece that had no title yet and moved the way the building moved at midnight. Quietly, deliberately, full of things that had been there for a long time. When she finished, one of the faculty members asked, "Where did you study composition?" "I didn't," she said. A pause. "That piece was yours?" "Yes." She found out 3 weeks later. She was in the auditorium when she read the email on her phone.
Late.
The building empty. The stage lamp on. She read the acceptance letter twice, then set her phone on the piano bench and sat very still. She heard the door. Sunny. The old woman walked down the aisle at her measured pace and sat in the front row and looked at Sophia. "Well," she said. Sophia handed her the phone. Sunhee read it. She looked up. There were tears on her face and she didn't wipe them. "Yunhee would have," she started. "I know," Sophia said. Her own voice was unsteady. "I know." They sat with it together for a while. Minjun arrived 20 minutes later. He came through the main doors and stopped when he saw them both in the front row. He looked at his grandmother's face. He looked at Sophia.
"What happened?" he said.
He patted the seat beside her. He sat. Sophia handed him the phone. He read it. Read it again. His jaw worked once. "Congratulations," he said. His voice was not managed. It was simply warm. The real register underneath the controlled one, which she had been learning to hear.
"Thank you," she said.
"For the materials, even if I didn't need them." "You did it entirely yourself," he said. "The materials were just paper." "You looked into it," she said. "You thought about what I might need before I knew I needed it." She looked at him. "That matters." He looked back at her. His grandmother had very deliberately begun studying the email on the phone with the absorbed attention of someone who was absolutely not listening to a word being said. "I have," he started. "I want to."
"Minjun," Sophia said quietly.
"Yes." "Ask me a real question," she said. A long breath. "Would you let me take you somewhere?" he said. "Not here. Not the Foundation. Somewhere that has nothing to do with the building or the piano or the job." He stopped. Just somewhere. She looked at him. She thought about the night he had stood outside the auditorium and listened to the Rachmaninoff all the way through. She thought about the correctly hung Renoir print. She thought about the egg. Yes, she said. Son, he handed the phone back to Sophia without looking up. Good, she said, to the auditorium at large, with immense satisfaction. Now someone play something. I didn't come down here at midnight to watch you two practice talking. Sophia laughed. She went to the piano. And in the room where grief had taught 3 people how to listen, the music began. The Foundation's autumn gala fell on a Saturday. Sophia arrived not through the service entrance on the east side of the building, but through the main doors, in a deep burgundy gown borrowed from no one and bought with the last of the summer savings she had not yet redirected toward tuition. Her hair was up. Her badge was not a lanyard. It was an invitation. Son, he was already seated in the front row when Sophia came into the auditorium. The old woman looked at her for a long moment and then made a small, decisive sound of approval that required no translation. Minjun was at the edge of the stage in his black suit, speaking with the Vienna Partnership director, and he stopped mid-sentence when he saw her. The Vienna director followed his eyeline, understood the situation with the instinct of a man who had spent 40 years watching people fall in love in concert halls, and excused himself graciously.
Mignon walked zu her.
He did not say anything immediately. He simply looked at her with the direct, unhurried attention she had come to understand meant he was being completely honest. I practiced, he said. She blinked. Practiced what? What I was going to say to you tonight. He held her gaze. I had 3 versions. What did you land on? None of them, he said. They were all too managed. She waited. I'm glad you're here, he said. Simply. I'm glad you're in this room, and not in the dark, and that people can see you. She looked at him. I'm glad too, she said. Behind them, the Steinway waited. In the front row, Sun Hee Kong smoothed her hanbok, lifted her barley tea, and smiled the kind of smile that belonged entirely to herself. The smile of a woman who had waited in the dark long enough to know exactly what it looked like when the light finally came back. The music was just beginning. If this story moved something in you, drop a comment below and let us know what moment got you most. And if you're new here, welcome to Felicity Romance Stories. We drop new stories every week, so make sure you subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss one.
We have so much more coming.
And we're just getting started.